But I think when you realize that the tweak, like, thank God I had already tweaked the reading. So a lot of the things that happened in Soul Teacher, it was a little overwhelming because I had like all these people that were paying me money and they were there, and it was like it was definitely overwhelming. But I did learn that the feedback was not like personal. It wasn't like I was bad. It was really they all the early students should have like stock in the program because they really were the ones that like built what we have today. It's been a community effort from the very beginning. And so I think like I started off myself like professionalizing the readings, but then I would say that once you get into like a group offer, it's the community that helps you professionalize like the next thing. If you're willing to listen, if you are like able to get past like how hard it is to hear bad feedback, like how difficult. And like Abby said, like Abby and I's relationship was not rainbows and butterflies. Like she was unhappy with a lot of the things. I had to like work. She was a diva of a student, as you could imagine.
Which I
I
was.
had to like work on her harder, and we could have given up. We could have been like, fuck you, like sorry to both of you. Like we could have both said that.
Yeah.
Um, but like we didn't, and we both, because she had to work too, like to kind of tweak whatever was within her, and I had to tweak the program and me as a teacher. And that is like, once you get past something like that and you realize that it's not personal, and as long as you believe in the product, like you can make it so much better with the help of like loving people that come your way. And I've been so blessed with like very loving people, and I think that's because I give that out. um there's always an asshole everywhere, every once in a while, and the things that you sell as a business owner. But you ultimately get to that place of like, oh, that's not about me, like that's not for me. But then also I think there's a super magical place as a business owner where you can be like, good feedback, not about me. When you're able to separate those things, that's actually when, because you're working two things at the same time. You're working a product and making a product like really great, and you're making a great leader at the same time. So you're kind of having to like receive the feedback and realizing what feedback is for the product, what feedback is for the leader, what is projection, what's not about the product, and what's not about you. And like as you split that, you're like chilling. That's where the magic is at. So the professionalization, to kind of circle back, Abby, like came from the tweaking, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just writing something down because as you were speaking, I'm like getting all these things. I was like, we need to talk about this. So I wanted to write down the first one that came down because I was like, we got to talk about this. But you mentioned something there at the end that I also want to touch on. And you guys, I need everybody to like hear this because it's something that I think not enough of us pay attention to. Is if you run into somebody who is um trigger isn't necessarily the right word because I wouldn't say that Nikki triggered me. I think what
Challenging, yeah, like
yeah,
challenging,
yeah, whether it's them as a teacher or leader, or whether it's like circumstance around the product that they're offering. The thing that I have learned is, and I've paid a lot of people like help me in various ways. And I have found that the teachers, the leaders who have challenged me, who have made me feel some sort of a way enough that I get pissy, that's the nice way of saying it, that I then go to them and I either say, you're really making me pissy, or I just like get in their email and I never write quite stop. I know, or like I just butt heads. Like that's the other way. Like sometimes I just butt heads. Um, I know that they're the ones that are meant for me. And that's not for everybody. Shouldn't say that it's for everybody, but I should say that it like this, that if you are coming up against that, if you have found that, pay attention to it. Really like lean into it a little bit. See, is this like it's a toxic environment, or is there something to mine here? because all of my best teachers, all of my best leaders, the people that I keep in my life. I mean, Nikki knows I don't leave her alone ever. Like, I got her on here, and it's been years since I took Soul Teacher or Soul Reading Method. Years, guys, at this point. God, like 4 years. It's like it's before the pandemic. So like a long ass time, and I'm still bugging her. Um, and it's a symbiotic relationship. We made each other better. I mean, she was always there to help get me to check myself, and of course, as she said, like the feedback that I was able to give was allowed her to be able to professionalize a product and really bring to the forefront a product that has been incredibly valuable to hundreds of, probably thousands of people at this point now. So lean into it a little bit. Those leaders that bug you, they're probably gold. They're probably gold.
And
But I do
Abby,
want
when
to.
you are the person, when you have a triggering student that comes your way and is the diva, I would love to be the first phone call, like just so I can like laugh a little bit. Like I'm not going to be kind like right away. I'm just going to kind of like giggle and make fun of you first, and then I will support you. But like I would like to be the first phone
Absolutely
call
do
to you.
that. Yeah, I will absolutely do that. Oh, kids, you deserve it. Honestly, every teacher I have ever like come butted heads against, they're like my favorite teachers. They're like I call them my moms. Yeah, I have so many examples of this. Um, but yeah, so the other thing that I wanted to bring up from what you were saying is that pro athlete comment that you made, or metaphor that you made of like pro athletes work at it. They probably have some sort of natural like ability. And what it reminded me of was the idea of soul contracts. So obviously, like we're talking about this not just for the like let's give business and leadership advice, but also about how does this play in our like destiny or our fate or our like what did we as souls choose for ourselves and write down that these are the lessons that we're going to learn or that we want to learn because this is what moves our soul forward. And I wanted to ask you, Nikki, do you feel like the inner soul contracts, like, or like taking yourself or like a professional athlete who's got this kind of almost like inclination or natural ability, and that them working at it, them feeling the need to work at it, do you think that that is kind of somebody's trigger for, oh, this is on my soul contract, and this, whether it's to start a business or whatever, could be a link?
Yeah, so I love that question. I believe that based off like all the people I've read and kind of obsessing over soul contracts and paths, and that's definitely like my work. That destiny, which I think is this feeling of like, and it's this feeling of like I'm like living into my destiny. I'm like living my true path or whatever. And I think we're all, of course, we're all seeking that. We really want, and there's that aspect of what Kim was saying that destiny can sometimes feel like, oh, then it should be easy and like there should be luck and all these kind of things, and that's where we get a little screwy. But destiny to me truly is a door. It's like it's a window of opportunity. It's a door that you could walk through. And once you walk through it and you start to like actually help create that destiny or whatever, but destiny alone is not the answer. So to me, the door that like opened for me was, hey, you can do this thing called readings and seems like you're really like interested in it. And then I think that when I walked through the door and I like followed that enough, then after destiny to me is really or really like that potential becomes like realized when you start actually like living and working into it and massaging it and like making it happen basically. So if not, it's just like raw potential, right? And then but you have to kind of like walk through that door. And I do feel that like, yeah, as for like your soul's contract, your soul's purpose, I was very hard. I was very hard on myself because growing up, because I did not know what I wanted to do for a living. My brothers always knew they were going to be doctors, and like that was not going to be the case for me because I wasn't good at science, or didn't. I would say I wasn't good at it, but it wouldn't hold my attention. So once I graduated and I took a few jobs, and I did jump from career to career. I studied publicity, and then I did that for 2 years, and I didn't love the whole world. I moved to writing. I loved writing. I was there, and then all of a sudden, like I lost passion for it, and so it was really like confusing for myself. I'm like, shit, like I don't finish anything, or I don't follow through, and that's kind of like what the feeling felt like. But with time, and as I've read so many people, and like now that I'm 41 and I've been in my career for a while, I do feel that like the things that are like truly for your soul, to some degree, they capture your attention. If Now, they will not capture your attention if there's very, very heavy self-doubt, and there's very, very heavy like like a lack of self-love, and a lack of like self-worth. Like if that is there, then this doesn't really like fully, this is not really like the answer. But if you can follow, like if you find something that's like you're curious about, and it's like, oh, I don't know, like I'm just curious, and I keep following it, those are the things that are typically in a person's contract. And then of course it's like up to them to then put in the work that comes along with the curiosity. And of course, like if you're feeling like, man, like I don't know what any of that is for me, or I get sparks of curiosity, but I never stick to it, or I never follow through, I would then ask yourself two things. Is it like, okay, fine, it's not catching your attention enough. Science did not catch my attention enough. Wasn't meant to be a doctor. Or is it, I am like drowning in self-doubt and like lack of self-worth, and maybe I should work on that first, like develop that first, so then I feel brave enough to follow the things that make me feel curious, so that I could live into my soul's path, because like it's on the other side of your curiosity and your attention. But it's hard if like there's a lot of self-doubt.
Mhm. Him using that sort of definition, where do you find yourself in that?
I love this because literally, as you were talking, it's like, Abigail, like I'm the queen of there are two truths, there are 10 truths, there are so many truths and everything, right? And so when you were talking, Nikki, I was like 100%. Like I hear exactly what you're saying. For me, and I'll speak into this because I think like that'll paint a picture of this. For me, when I was in my previous career, I got to a point where it became easy, like so easy. It was a well-oiled machine. I could guarantee like a $250,000 a year. I literally had no more physical space to keep expanding and growing. And I was sitting there like, is this it? I am like 28 years old. This is it. And I can remember saying to a staff member there, I don't think there's anything left here for me to learn. And most people, that's not a question or a care that they have. They don't care if they're learning or doing things in their job. They don't care if they're trying to reach a higher potential or like this expansion. They're just moving through life. And so that to me was an indicator in that moment that it was destiny, right? Like, and it piqued my interest. But I, much like you were just talking about, I had no self-concept. I had a really rough childhood, And so I had no self-esteem, even though I was completely killing it. They literally called me the fearless leader there. Like that was it. I didn't believe any of that. And so in that moment when I had this desire to go try something, to even explore the idea of going to apply somewhere else, I didn't even think I was worthy of that. Like I had resorted to the fact that this is where I'm going to be. And then it was like this is where the other truth I believe sometimes comes in too, because this is that moment for me where I didn't choose this path. Like I didn't consciously choose it. Quite literally in that moment, like the universe pushed my ass, right? Like that was the moment where it was like, okay, honey, you're going and you're going to have to lay yourself off and your entire team and everything that you built like the whole thing. And it was that moment that like, I lost my identity. I literally was like, who the fuck am I? Enter every single spiritual awakening we've all been through. And I sat in that moment like, okay, what am I going to do? And much like you, Nikki, in this moment, I went and sought out a support from an Akashic Records reader. And I got my records read, and she was like, girlfriend, like, you have been a coach. That's not what they've called it, but you've been a coach in every single lifetime. Like, that is who you are. That is what you do. And she was like, you should, this is how funny this is, you guys. She was like, you should become a coach. And I literally was like a gym coach. Because I didn't know the coaching industry existed. I didn't know it existed. And so in that moment, I started to follow this path. I walked through the gateway. I trusted myself. I said to my husband, this is it. We're going to do this. And he was, oh my God, thank Jesus for this man, because he has absolutely supported me and held me up in all the times that I thought that I couldn't get anywhere, that it wasn't going to happen, but like in the same breath, he was like, you followed it. We're going, keep going, you know? And I kept following it. And it was,
doesn't it? Because this is why I have these two on. They're similar but different. Sorry, I can't go on.
Yes. And so like, that's where in this moment, it was like, much like you said, some of the language that I kind of use from a spiritual perspective is sometimes we have to find out what isn't to find out what is. And so as I was going on this journey, it was like, well, obviously I'm a coach. Like what type of coach am I? I just went through the spiritual awakening. I've been doing this work for so long and da, 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 da. Okay, I'm going to do a spiritual life coach. And I started doing that, and I started working with clients, and I loved it. And like, truth be told, like month one, I had a $20,000 cash in hand month. And that was mind blowing. And because of all that work that I still needed to do, my nervous system shut down for 12 weeks after receiving that. It was awful. I was crying every day. I felt like I was an imposter. There was no way I could serve people. I felt like a fraud, like all of these things. And then I decided, no, Kim, let's pick ourselves back up, right? And then we sat there, and it was like, okay, I can hone my skill here. I can hone it. But regardless, the results that were coming, I was like, I can't deny that my actual skill set is more oriented in business and leadership than it is in like healing and spiritual life coaching. That's the truth of it. Like, are all those components still very much a part of my coaching? Yes. Like, yes. All my people are very woo people. Yes. So it all is alive and well in that space. However, I sat there and I realized it was like, Kim, like, you get activated. The language I use is turned on. I get turned on learning business strategies. I get activated learning new ideas of how to grow a business, of what profitable pathways are, and how to help people. Like, I can't help but want to like dive into the boring shit that nobody wants to read about. And so it was like that moment of realizing like, okay, so the gateway was coach. You went in and you tried out the spiritual life coaching, you did the one-to-ones, you did the groups, you did all this. And honestly, Abigail obviously knows this, I had a business partner. I was in relationship with a business partner the whole time. And then it was like, we're going to pivot. And once we pivoted into business coaching, slowly but surely, that's where my business partner started to not see herself, because that wasn't always her. She was my right hand woman, legitimately, like helped me make every decision and do all these things and was privy to so much. But that's where she started to lose sight of herself. And so eventually it was like, okay, we had built up a brand of 46,000 followers. We had done it all. And I was like, we're going to burn that to the ground. I'll start a new brand. I'm not worried. I know what I'm doing. I believe in my work. I believe in helping people. I trust myself. Let's fucking go. And so literally that was in September. And so that's the thing, is like, for me, when I look at it from a soul contract destiny level, yeah, it's like all these little moments of really deepening our relationship to ourselves and who we decide we want to be. And I uncovered that a little bit in my first career. I uncovered that more in my spiritual awakening. I uncovered that more in the spiritual life coaching. And man, like, there were more tears shed in that spiritual awakening and spiritual life coaching era of my life than I've ever cried in the totality of my entire life, right? Like, entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart. That is the truth of it. But it is for the people who are, in my eyes, soul driven. Like, if you can't help but feel a call or hear something, or a desire is so deep within you, it just keeps coming up. That to me is an indicator that timeline or that reality is available to you. It's completely available to you. Does that mean, like we were saying, does that mean it's going to be easy? No. Does it mean that there aren't going to be things thrown in your way? You're going to have these energetic boulders that you have to work through all the time? Yeah, like all of that's going to be there, but it's that end desire to like reach that space. It's like peak potential, really. It's like this your highest potential, but not in this hustle drive, like, oh, I got to get my peak potential, peak performance. Like, it literally is like, I can see the finish line there, and it's not a finish line, but it feels good to arrive at that point. And so that's what I'm moving towards, is moving towards this finish line. That's just one more stop on an infinite finish line, right? Like that's sort of how I perceive it. And throughout my life, I've had these moments where it's clear as day that I listened, or I heard it and I stopped. I heard it and I pulled back. And then eventually the universe was like, all right, bitch, you're gone. You're going. And that was that moment for me that completely changed my life. The hardest moment of my life, absolutely. But also it was like the biggest wake up call, and the moment where I felt more aligned and more myself than I've ever felt. And now I'm just continuously deepening that in my work, deepening that in my message and how I show up in my own energy and my thought leadership. Like that's where I'm at now. And so I guess like anybody that's really listening to this, like the truth is you're going to have these moments where you want to waver, where you want to fall, where you want to just throw in the towel. But I think this statistic is helpful. In business in general, it is considered a win if you win 60% of the time.
Which sounds crazy.
40, right? 40,
that sounds crazy.
40% of the time, the most successful entrepreneurs, 40% of the time are not succeeding, and they just simply view it as a lesson, and that's it. And it's literally like, it's not intuitive to think that you can fail almost 50% of the time, but still be succeeding. And I think like that's the space, that's that energy to hold that duality, to hold both of those realities in your body at the exact same time, and feel into the expansive nature of that. Like, because the truth is like, if it is equal parts, then a failure never really is a failure, because it's always going to come after, or something's always going to come after it. What's going to come after it? Probably that win, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's just like living in that space of like, this is entrepreneurship. I'm not doing it for the entrepreneur journey. I'm doing it for something so much bigger than me. And that's that alignment. It's that calling. It's that drive that I couldn't try to articulate or put it in a box in any way, shape, or form. But I'll keep moving towards it because I know that that's my truth. I know that that's where I need to go.
Yes. Nikki, you absolutely have been on this, not a similar journey from like what Kim is saying, but I definitely I know your story. I don't know. I mean, you've talked a little bit about your story, about how you started with a career in film, and I know Refinery 29 and all of these other areas, the blogging, the starting to write, deciding to leave writing, coming back to writing eventually after you found reading, so tweaked it and started your own. But you worked in your husband's business, you managed your husband's business, like kept it off the ground for years until you were like, okay, can't do this anymore. Like there were so many of those start and stop moments for you. Thinking about your soul contract and understanding that business is definitely a part of your contract, probably in a variety of ways. Where for you was this hardest part, those like stickiest lesson that is on your contract that you're like, okay, we gotta learn this. And like, I mean, because there's gotta be something, right? I mean, I would say you probably wouldn't be transitioning so much if it weren't there, right? Or am I completely off the mark there?
Yeah, no, thank you for the question. I'm gonna like answer that by like explaining something first that I've learned from the readings, and then I'll go into that. But like, so, I like when we think soul purpose, of course, so many of us like think work, like that's we can thank the like millennials for that, right? Like we introduced this idea of like we have a purpose, and we definitely kind of made that as work. But from a soul level, like it's definitely much wider than that. It's, you know, it's a much higher perspective than that's just that. So like to say, I'm sure there was moments in my life where I was like, oh, I'm meant to be a writer, but like that's me as a human, like being very like zoomed in. But if I talk to my soul, like she's, you know, she can see such a higher perspective. She can see the whole path ahead. So she understands that like it is bigger than a writer. But for now, we're gonna call herself a writer, and we're gonna give her that identity and kind of like let her believe that that's okay, so that she can just do this part of the journey. And then so like definitely like when you're thinking about like your contract, you have to remember that the soul is not American. It doesn't speak English. Like, you know, it's like it doesn't like exist in the body. So the terms that like we use is very different than like what the soul, if the soul is the one that's creating the soul's contract before it comes to this lifetime, it is really, it's not a written contract, it's not in English or whatever language it is that we speak. It's energetic, right? So, and it's also like ever evolving, all that stuff. So I think whenever we get like too caught up with like some of the names or the labels, we can get like a little tricky. And as humans, we're always looking for identity, you know, like how Kim was saying that like when she left her job as the director of that preschool, it's like, oh my God, who am I? And it's like so funny. Like Kim just decided that all she was the director of like, you know, and we all do that. I remember when I was leaving, being a fashion and beauty editor, my identity was so caught up in that. It was such a fun kind of like flashy, you know, in Miami, I was like running the scene there, as you guys could imagine. And when I was leaving that to run my husband's tree business, like it was very hard because like my identity was off. So, you know, when you kind of realize that identities are important, every once in a while we do need them. Like I need to call myself a mom so that I stay grounded in this job as a mother. I need to call myself a reader so that I like do the time that like my soul is like, hey, you're going to read a lot of people in a matter of X amount of years, and you're going to call yourself a reader, and you're going to use that identity. So identities are helpful to really ground us. But as the contract starts to talk to us and say like, okay, hey, promotion time, it's time to move to the next thing, identities become the worst thing, because it's very hard to move over to the next thing. So it's like you need it sometimes, and then you actually have to like totally let it go as you move through your contract. And Kim, I think you were talking to this, that like, you know, a lot of we come from many generations of just like doing the same job forever, right? Like I'm sure a lot of your parents, I have friends that, you know, their dads were in AT&T. My neighbor retired from AT&T. He's like a 67-year-old guy, and he still wears his AT&T uniform during the day because he gardens now, and he says like gardening is his job, and he still wears his AT&T uniform because that is such a big part of his identity that like, you know, that's like, he's like, I'm in work mode, I will wear my AT&T uniform. It's hilarious. But
like, I'm doing that with my scrubs in like 5 years. I'm gonna be so upset with myself.
You're like, Nikki just called me out and didn't even know that she called me out. So whatever, it's like it's helpful. But I think the kind of souls that are coming in lately, ourselves, our children, all that, it's just not as linear anymore. So like you have to know that your contract, your purpose is going to be a series of evolutions, and you should see yourself as like your favorite artist, like as Madonna. You know, Madonna has lived how many lives, right? Like how different has every album been? Taylor Swift, the eras, right? That's really a reflection of like how we should see ourselves, that we are like ever evolving creatures, and with that like the work is going to evolve. I think entrepreneurship is a good choice for a lot of souls nowadays, because it's a nice container for all the evolution that happens in a person. So I think that that's like why so many of us are driven to entrepreneurship. If you follow my business, I have I've had my business, I think, for 12 years. And it might look like, oh wow, Nikki's had her business for 12 years, but if I was in a job, you would think I've changed my job a million times within those 12 years, because all I'm doing is evolving within my company, and it still gets to be called Nikki Novo Co. But I mean, like I used to teach blogging, and then I taught dating and all those kind of things. So in a way, I'm a person that has changed jobs many times, but it doesn't look that way because it's under like the guise of like my business, right? So I think we have to be comfortable with evolving, especially if you're called to entrepreneurship. And that's just a sign that like your soul has a lot to do this lifetime. And entrepreneurship is like kind of broad enough for you to be able to get those things done, because your purpose must be pretty like strong that it needs even the hours of work to be able to like accomplish its purpose. So it's like I like I'm a soul that has like a lot of things to do, and I can't throw away 8 hours of the day to like AT&T, let's say, whatever. Not to say that that's not somebody's purpose, but I need to like really use that time to create something. So that is like why a lot of these kind of souls that are coming in are choosing entrepreneurship. So as for like the hardest like lessons, I mean, ask me what day of the week it is. You know, it's like maybe ask me what is the hardest lesson of today, because it's all hard. And I always like tell people that are interested in entrepreneurship, I'm like, listen, it's just a different type of hard. You know, my girlfriend is really high up at a big corporate company, and she comes home every day at 7 o'clock, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I could like, and you know, she doesn't see her kids, and like, or my sister-in-law who's a plastic surgeon who has a really like intense job, like that like is hard for me. But then my sister-in-law will be like, yeah, right, I think what you do is super hard. Like, she's like, you're always available to your kids, like you're always managing, like you'll work at night if you have to because you're at your kids like play during the day. So it's just a different type of hard, you know, but it just that it feels like the kind of hard that I want to choose. And I would say the hardest thing for me is with my old age. I think it was, and I think as you kind of hit some sort of success, which I have, right? Like I have already had my like my albums that have hit. And of course, after you have an album that hits, it's very easy to stay comfortable in like what you're doing. When I was making albums that nobody was listening to anyways, it was really easy for me to know when it was time to like close that and move on to the next thing. But I think that with time, as you get like deeper into your work, it is hard. And I think anybody that maybe had a career, that I know Nicole here, right? Like you've had a career, and it's hard to when that career gets kind of comfortable, it's like it's kind of hard to like close and go to the next thing. And I do feel that that is a hard thing for me often, because like I love my people and I get like attached to service, like serving them that way. But there's always this pool of like, yes, we're here to serve, but first and foremost, you're here to like serve yourself as well. And sometimes like when you're really like into the people that you're working with and the people that you love, which is very much like the story of me, when it's time to like move to the next thing, you do feel like you're abandoning them, because you're like, you know, you're changing things, and you might stay somewhere a little bit longer than you're supposed to. And it might be hard to get clarity on the next thing. So to me, in my stage, I find that currently to be the hardest thing, to kind of get out of that comfort zone, because you were trying so hard to make something work, you finally make it work, and now the universe is like, okay, great, promotion time. And you're like, fuck you, it's so comfortable here. Like, I worked really damn hard to get here. Now you're telling me to like climb another mountain? Like, you just don't expect that, because for a long time you're like looking to just get to the top of the mountain. You get there, and then as a pro athlete, there's only a certain amount of time that I can actually stay at the top of the mountain. I'm ready to get up and hike the next one. But it is hard to like know when it's time to like let something die. And you usually have to let something die when it's at its peak, which is so crazy.
And that is part 2, guys, of the Business and Leadership edition of this Soul Contract series. We are so excited for you to take a look at the third part. But first, of course, I need to mention that all of the ways to work with these lovely ladies are down in the show notes, as well as the organizations that they are uplifting. Please go ahead and check them out and think about blessing somebody else today. Also, go ahead and like, comment, subscribe, and share for anyone who needs this conversation. And of course, we will see you in part 3.